Hello, everybody, and welcome to Buck Wild, the bonus miniseries, and the buck starts here, where we take one last cannonball into the powdered wig pool that is the Revolutionary Era. I'm Kyle, joined by Eric Mason, my credentialed and very opinionated co-host, and we are tying up the loose ends in Eric's notebook.
So, John Adams. I have 2 ones for John Adams because I was able to really dive deep into the JQA during the last series. One is we definitely have to do a correction. That alligator story is like a complete hoax.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to remember why that even came up in, because that wasn't the John Q. Adams episode. That was the first time we mentioned, I think, presidential pets, which is the first time.
Oh, probably John Adams. Yeah.
I think it was. But, okay, so that was a hoax.
Yeah, it was a hoax. It was written by this guy. We don't know who it was originally written by. There are a lot of evidence that it was contemporary. It was like an ongoing joke, all stuff. But there's a historian. Shout out to him, Andrew Hager. He actually traced it back to a series of books and articles written in 1888. He's very funny. He's like, "There's no evidence that this happened, but there's also no evidence it didn't happen."
Yeah, there's no evidence that aliens weren't at the first Thanksgiving.
I love the South Park episode on that. So I do talking about very famous conspiracy theories involving aliens. During John Adams' presidency, there was a gentleman named John Cleves Symmes Jr. who tried to convince the federal government to fund an expedition to the center of the Earth. So he was just like just absolutely like character, former U.S. Army officer and trader. He gained all this attention in like the 19th century for promoting this theory that the Earth was hollow, and which is obviously a hilarious just take on everything. And so he proposed this polar exploration. At the same time, Russia and a bunch of other countries are exploring the polar region. There's a bunch of famous Brits.
So was his idea to go to the poles because he thought that there was an easier way into the center of the Earth from there?
Yeah, he thought the world's gonna look like a stretch donut. Like you go to the top there. So he starts publishing this circular, and then he writes I declare the Earth is hollow and habitable within, connecting a number of solid concentric spheres, one within the other. So he didn't think there was just like an empty space in between it. He thought there was another smaller Earth with another hole, and another hole, like a Russian nesting doll of hollow Earths. The hell did we get here in this conversation?
Who was this guy again? John Cleves.
John Cleves Symmes Jr.
Was he? Was he an alchemist? Did he spend a lot of time working with lead?
Hopefully, that would be literally the only way to explain this. Yeah, so you believe there was like these 2 4,000-mile openings at the bottom of the Earth, which I don't know how he got 4,000 miles. So he was convinced he'd be able to sail directly in the middle of the world. I'm very curious if he thought he'd get to like the brim and he'd be like, whoop, and just like kind of go back over the other side, or like just fall into the abyss. I don't know. I thought that was crazy.
Anyway.
So Samizans were his followers' names, which I think that's an amazing word. But yeah, so he believes he could sail in there. He ends up going and trying to get funding for this in the 1820s, petitions Congress.
So he didn't get his expedition, I'm assuming.
No, he didn't. It actually gets. It was going to get funded. John Quincy Adams was like, you need to make this scientific, because they believed in polar exploration. So he had to repackage and rebrand everything. There was a method to his madness. Like there was ideas of there was a huge sense of national pride to be able to go out there and say like, hey, we're exploring this, and so that's why
you want to be the one to plant the flag in the center of the Earth. I mean, who wouldn't?
Now the key here is that people will make it out like John Quincy Adams supported this because he was a big science guy.
Yeah.
And but no, he didn't. He was lobbied pretty heavily by some of this gentleman's allies in Congress. But he was very open to a polar expedition. He thought it was really good. Jackson immediately canceled this, by the way, like the minute he came to the office.
The journey to the center of the Earth, he canceled. Like I'm okay with that, I think.
What a horrible man. Now, I do want to point out something, right? So in order to fund this, he went on all these big speaking tours, all right, and he gives all these lectures and stuff. And one of my favorite things that happens is, so he goes out west and he gives all these tours, and people love him. People think he's a genius and he's brilliant. Look at all these great ideas. And they have this like faux manifest destiny, but of like the Arctic. And they love him. And they think he's brilliant. He gets all these monies. And he'd go to New England, and he'd show up to, I don't know, like Harvard, right? He's showing up to these institutions, and he'd start talking. And people were like, you're just some crazy crank. We're not listening to this. No, there's no... So, like, he would get, like, ridiculed. And I can imagine that must have felt weird. Like, you're out west, you're like, listen, guys, this is what... He would have, like, huge areas packed full of people who would be listening to him.
In Europe?
No, this is out west.
Oh,
like,
out west, okay.
Yeah, like Manifest Destiny area, like the frontier.
Okay. I thought you were talking about, like, for some reason I always got the impression he's out in, like, court in France and Russia.
Dude, they probably loved him if he went out there.
Yeah, they would have loved it, yeah.
But no, this is like, this is Western United States. And they think he's, like, brilliant, and it's all, but then you go to, like, the smart people, and they're like, dude, get the hell out of here. We don't want to hear about you.
Dude,
I'm trying not to swear. Is that right there?
In the West in the 1800s, 1840s, it's people who basically borderline feral, if we want to be completely honest. Right? Come on.
Some explorers? What are you talking about? It's like you got Ohio.
There's some explorers, but
you live where those people were.
I know, but I still enjoy the trappings of society. I don't grow my own food or hunt it down. And I sure should move out of here to get away from all the laws of civilization.
I want to believe in the hollow earth, and I will believe in the hollow earth as I shall please. But yeah, I did think that was like a funny side story. No, but I mean, Adams didn't support the idea of a hollow earth. He was a brilliant man. It's funny, when I was researching this, I came across a lot of historians who routinely would utter a very similar phrase, that Adams is the most pro-science president ever, including the modern presidents.
Really?
He just loves science for science sake. Adams is a very pro-science president, but it is funny that if I say, oh, hollow earth in the presidency, that it's actually tied to John Quincy Adams. So yeah, but no, it was just, it was a real expedition they were going to fund. Yeah. But Adams made sure that, no, this is a polar expedition. This has nothing to do with a hollow earth that he didn't believe. The earth. But no, it is very funny to see the most scientific president tied in with this like weird pseudoscience rumor.
Well, it makes sense though. If you're gonna embrace the sciences, you're gonna embrace some real fringe stuff, right? Just trying to go through to find what's true and what's not.
Especially the 1820s.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably a good point to put a pin in this one. Join me in thanking our esteemed colleague Eric Mason here for taking time out of his busy day to regale us with stories from his, I guess, the deep dive into his note-taking, really. Is what
meandering descent into insanity. Presidential insanity.
I think next time you hear from us, we should be joined again with our dear friend Ray, as we're going to take a look at not just... I think last time we had her on, we talked about George Washington stuff, but
the famous
this
portrait.
time, we're going to go over all the portraits, anything of interest over the last 6 presidents, and you wanted to also talk about the monuments this time.
Oh, yeah. I the reason we did this isn't just because we really like Ray and she's brilliant. We also did this because John Quincy Adams is the first president to be photographed.
And so Ray has already brought an interesting angle to this. She wants to talk about like the idea or the mistaken belief that photography is more trustworthy than paintings, and I think that's just a fascinating. I'm
very excited for that because I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of that. I also just like how I'm a huge fan of like, primary sources. I'm like, okay, but by the way, people can lie in primary sources.
Right?
People have a greater incentive to lie in a primary source.
All right. Well, if you've got your own primary sources you want to send to us, you can do that by dropping a comment or by emailing us at buckstartsherepodcast@gmail.com. Remember, there's no "the" there. And on your way out, you visit the website, Buck Starts Here Podcast, to browse our growing back catalog. Hit subscribe on your favorite platform, and we will see you all next week. Produced by China Shop Productions.